A 9-year-old girl vanished on Valentine's Day, a day meant for love. But all that was left behind was a cold rain, an empty backpack, and a mother's heart that never stopped waiting. Valentine's Day, 2000, North Carolina. While the rest of the world celebrated with flowers and chocolate, one small African-American family stepped into a nightmare that would never end. Asha Degree, 9 years old, sweet, book-loving, never, once wandered off alone, disappeared from her bedroom. In the middle of a stormy night, no one heard a sound. There were no broken locks. And even stranger, some people claimed they saw Asha walking alone down a dark rural road surrounded by woods. Why would a little girl, terrified of the dark, leave? Home at 3 a.m.? Who or what was waiting for her out? There, no witnesses, no note, no clear leads. Just one unanswered question that's haunted everyone for over 2 decades. Asha Degree was born on August 5th, 1990, the first child of Harold and Aquila Degree, black couple living in the small town of Shelby, North Carolina. They didn't have much, but they worked hard to build a home filled with love and structure. Harold worked shifts at a manufacturing plant, while Aquila was a secretary for a local company. Both believed in discipline and in protecting their children from the dangers of the outside world, a mindset shared by many Black American families who've long had to navigate injustice and systemic neglect. Shelby wasn't a noisy place. It was the kind of small town where everyone more or less knew each other. Kids played basketball in driveways or rode their bikes through the neighborhood after school. In that world, Asha stood out as a quiet, well-mannered, gentle child. She especially loved books, particularly fantasy, stories where her imagination could transport her far beyond the red dirt roads of her hometown. From a young age, Asha's mother taught her that life wasn't always fair, but that you could still choose to live kindly and work hard. And Asha listened. She was a good student, always finished her homework, and never caused trouble. Teachers loved her for her attentiveness and kindness. Her younger brother, O'Brien, just a year behind her, was her best friend. They played basketball together after school, shared a bedroom, and lived inside their own little world filled with stories Asha made up at bedtime. The Degrees didn't allow their kids to use the internet. There was no computer in the house, not out of being old-fashioned, but because they believed in simplicity and safety. They raised their children with clear boundaries, conversation, discipline, and love. That's what made Asha's disappearance so confounding. A child with no exposure to social media, no problems. At school, no bad influences. Walking out of her home in the middle of the night, it was completely at odds with everything they knew about their daughter. To those who knew her, Asha was the kind of child parents don't have to worry about. She wasn't rebellious. She didn't ask too many risky questions. She wasn't dangerously curious. But behind her eyes was something deeper, a quiet, inner world where she dreamed of things far beyond the life she knew. Every night after homework, Asha would curl up with a book under the soft glow of her bedside lamp. One of her favorites was The Whipping Boy, a fantasy novel about a young prince who runs away with his poor companion. That story, unknowingly, may have planted the seed of something strange in a 9-year-old's mind. Still, Asha was a cautious child. She was afraid of dogs. She feared the dark. She would never go anywhere without an adult. Whenever the power went out during storms, she'd run to her mother's room, cling to her tightly, and wouldn't let go until the lights came back on. Knowing that, no one could imagine her stepping out into a storm at nearly 3 a.m. while the rest of the house slept. The bond between Asha and her mother was one of the most special parts of the Degree family. Aquila wasn't just a parent. She was her daughter's confidant and companion. They did homework together, went to church, and shared nightly talks before bed. Aquila vividly remembers how Asha would recount the books she read, describing the characters with such excitement that it made her smile, amazed that her little girl could have such a rich imagination, which is why, when it happened, nothing made sense. There were no warning signs. That day, Asha went to school like normal. She played basketball in the afternoon, ate dinner with her family, bathed, brushed her teeth, went to bed, just like every other night. There were no arguments, no trouble, nothing that would make anyone think a child was about to run away. Everything was peaceful, eerily so. Valentine's Day 2000 was also a special day for the Chateaus. Degrees. It was Harold and Aquila's wedding anniversary. As always, they didn't do anything elaborate. Just a quiet dinner, a gentle toast, a few laughs with the kids. They felt lucky to be raising their children in a close-knit community where danger felt distant. That night, Harold left for his usual overnight shift. Aquila checked on the kids one last time before bed. Asha and O'Brien were fast asleep. Everything was normal. But around 5:45 the next morning, when Aquila went to wake them for school, she found Asha's bed empty. Her heart dropped. At first, she thought Asha might be in the bathroom, or with her grandmother. But in a small house like theirs, there weren't many places to be lost. Within minutes, fear turned to terror. Asha wasn't anywhere. The doors were still locked. No one had heard a thing. No cries, no footsteps, no signs of struggle. Her brother O'Brien later said he heard her bed creak around 3 a.m., but figured she was just turning over. That eerie silence made everything even more surreal. For a child just 9 years old, with no phone, no way to bike far, no reason to leave, walking out into the rainy night seemed unthinkable. All the family knew was that Asha was gone, and they had no idea why. In that moment, their world collapsed. A home once filled with laughter was now frozen into horror. A place that had felt so safe became the starting point of an unending journey through grief, hope, and heartbreaking uncertainty. Back then, no one could have known that Asha's story would become one of the most mysterious child disappearances in modern American history. A story that not only questioned the fate of one little girl, but also exposed the invisible cracks in faith, safety, and justice. The morning of February 14th, 2000. Shelby's skies were still gray from the rain that had fallen through the night. But inside the Degree family's modest home, the real storm had just begun. In the heart of a mother who found her daughter's bed empty, a wave of terror crashed over her. Asha, the sweet, obedient little girl who had never once left home alone, had vanished in the night without a trace. Harold rushed home from his overnight shift. Within the hour, local police arrived. They searched every corner of the house, then spread out to the surrounding neighborhood. Churches, schools, and neighbors were alerted. A missing child alert was issued, and the community immediately sprang into action. But what confused everyone was this: there was no sign of forced entry. The doors were locked. No broken windows. No evidence anyone had taken Asha by force, which pointed to something even more disturbing. Asha had walked out of the house herself, on her own, in the dark, in the rain. Within hours, search teams were deployed. K-9 units were brought in. A helicopter circled the nearby woods. More than 60 rescue workers, officers, and volunteers combed the area. They trudged through mud, flashed lights into thick brush, and searched for anything that might belong to Asha. But they found nothing. No clear footprints. No scraps of clothing. No cries for help. For a child to go missing in a residential neighborhood and leave no trace, it was almost impossible. In those first 24 hours, the most critical window in a missing child case all police in the family had was silence. No phone calls, no notes, no clues, no signs of an abduction, but no evidence she'd run away either. The more they searched, the more it felt like Asha had been swallowed by the night. Hope flickered in the form of witness reports. One early morning driver said he saw a small figure walking along Highway 18 around 3:15 a.m., heading away from the Degree home. He described a young black girl wearing a long-sleeved white shirt and light pants moving quickly with her, head down in the rain. Thinking she was just a neighborhood kid, he didn't stop. But then another driver, coming by shortly after, said he saw the same girl and did what anyone would hope someone might. He stopped. The second driver said he turned his car around, flicked on his high beams, and approached the girl, calling out to her. But the moment the headlights hit her, the girl bolted, sprinting off the road and into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. No scream, no looking back. That girl, if it was really Asha, had a deeply unsettling reaction, not relief, but fear of the light and the help it offered. It made investigators wonder, why would a child, alone, at night, be afraid of an adult trying to help? Was she hiding from someone, or running from something even worse? A few days later, police found small items. A hairbow, a pencil, a candy wrapper, near the spot, where witnesses had last seen Asha. Her family confirmed they belonged to her. Their location matched her supposed path and only added weight to the theory that Asha had walked a significant distance on her own that night. But why? Where was she going? And who was she going to? As the community kept searching, a heavy silence settled over Shelby. Neighbors who once saw Asha laughing in the schoolyard now lit candles on their porches. The media descended, turning the small town into the center of one of the most baffling missing child cases in American history. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. But no further signs emerged. Asha had vanished, seemingly into thin air. The Degree family refused to give up. They printed flyers, knocked on every door, begged for tips from anyone who might have driven down that highway. They visited churches, schools, shopping centers, hoping someone, anyone, had seen her. Volunteers continued the search in teams, but harsh weather and thick woods made the effort feel increasingly hopeless. Then, 18 months later, something changed the course of the investigation. In August 2001, a construction worker off Highway 18, over 25 miles from Asha's home, uncovered a black backpack buried inside a plastic bag. What stunned investigators, it had Asha Degree embroidered on it. Inside were school books and personal items, all still intact. The bag was sealed and sent for forensic analysis, but yielded no breakthroughs, no foreign DNA, no signs of violence, just presence. A backpack buried in silence, as if someone wanted to erase the existence of a child. What was troubling, the location where the bag was found wasn't anywhere Asha could have reasonably reached, on foot. It wasn't near any of the areas where she'd been seen, which raised a chilling possibility. Someone had taken her out of Shelby, and that someone knew how to hide evidence. But who? And why keep her backpack nearly untouched, only to bury it so deliberately? Investigators had hoped the discovery would break the case open. Instead, it led only to more silence, no arrests, no new leads. And for years afterward, the same questions haunted everyone who remembered that dark morning. Who took Asha? And what happened after those headlights caught a glimpse of her one final time by the third month of the investigation? There were still no clear leads, and the case was becoming more confusing than anyone had imagined. What baffled investigators wasn't just the lack of evidence, but the presence of small, seemingly illogical, and at times contradictory, details throughout Asha's disappearance. Some speculated that Asha might have planned to leave home. This theory was based on the fact that she had packed a few personal belongings the night before she vanished. A couple of books, a change of clothes, her backpack. That wasn't the action of a child being taken against her will. But others argued that packing a bag didn't necessarily mean she had a plan. Kids mimic what they read in stories all the time. And Asha clearly had a vivid imagination. Still, if she did leave on purpose, why? There were no signs of conflict at home. No reports from teachers or friends suggesting trouble at school. Everything seemed far too normal for a little girl to walk away from the safest place she knew. Then came the conflicting witness accounts. One driver said Asha ran from his headlights, avoiding someone who was clearly trying to help. That's not how most children react when they're in danger, unless they've been taught to fear help. Was she told to stay quiet? Was there a promise or a threat? Or was she running towards someone she trusted, more than her own family? Another complicating factor, no one knew where Asha was headed. If she was walking, she could only have gone so far in 2 or 3 hours. But her backpack was found over 25 miles from her home, buried underground. That all but confirmed she had been transported by vehicle, which made the idea of her running away almost Impossible. A child afraid of the dark, with no money, no direction, couldn't have planned something that elaborate on her own. As local police ran out of leads, the Degree family took matters into their own hands. They reached out to the media, missing children's organizations, and even independent journalists to keep the case alive. But over time, they realized something deeply painful. Their daughter's disappearance wasn't receiving the attention it deserved. A missing white child of the same age in another state could make national headlines, while Asha, a black girl from a small town, seemed to slip quietly past the media's radar. In a later interview, Asha's mother, Akila, said, "I'm not blaming anyone, but I know if she looked different, things might have been different." Amid the unanswered questions, new reflections began to surface from neighbors and friends who knew Asha well. Some recalled that she had seemed quieter lately, less playful. One teacher remembered Asha being upset after losing an important basketball game, feeling like she'd let the team down. For a 9-year-old, a sense of failure can sometimes grow into something much heavier. But was that enough to make her walk away in the middle of the night unnoticed? Others raised more complex theories. Could someone have reached out to Asha beforehand, through a friend, a letter, or even in person, and planted the idea of a mission, an adventure, or a promise? The family didn't have a computer at home, but Asha still went to school, still read books from the big library. A manipulative adult with bad intentions could easily deceive a smart child with little real-world experience. But there was no proof of this. No one recalled a stranger near the house. No letters were found. Nothing unusual was reported by the school. Eventually, investigators had to face a frustrating truth. Every theory contradicted itself. Every clue seemed to miss a vital piece. Asha's story didn't follow any traditional investigative logic. It felt like an unfinished novel, pages missing, key details ripped out. And with each new piece of information, the previous ones became harder to trust. It was in the middle of this tangled web that a new and unexpected figure would emerge, bringing with them a perspective that could change everything. 4 years after Asha disappeared in 2004, the case was officially classified as a cold case, unsolved mystery. But for the Degree family, nothing about it felt cold. Every day, they still waited for the phone to ring, still held on to hope that a new lead would surface. The pain didn't fade. It simply grew quieter, deeper, harder to share. Meanwhile, in another part of North Carolina, a name began to surface among potential suspects: Donald Preston Ferguson. Ferguson, a 52-year-old white man, had a disturbing criminal history. In 1990, the same year Asha was born, he was convicted of murdering a 10-year-old girl in South Carolina. After years in prison, he was released and moved to a small town not far from where Asha went missing. In 2014, Ferguson was arrested again for another offense involving a young girl. His record immediately caught the attention of the FBI. When agents retraced Ferguson's movements, they found that around early 2000, he had been in western North Carolina. That timing lined up alarmingly well with Asha's disappearance. Even more troubling, some locals reported seeing Ferguson wandering near residential areas, watching, asking about children. These reports had never been fully followed up. Now, they took on a new weight. When the FBI approached the Degree family to ask about any unfamiliar faces in the neighborhood, Asha's mother didn't recognize Ferguson, but she also admitted they didn't know everyone who passed through their small community. That uncertainty only deepened the suspicion. Could Donald Ferguson have lured or abducted Asha that night? If so, why was there no trace? And if not, how could so many coincidences align? The public quickly split. Some believed this was the breakthrough the case needed. Others, more cautious, pointed out that Ferguson's past, disturbing as it was, didn't automatically make him guilty of every unsolved case. That tension created a painful emotional limbo, hope mixed with confusion and fear that justice might once again slip away. As investigators tried to find a connection between Ferguson and Asha's disappearance, a new witness suddenly came forward, and changed the direction of the case once more. In May 2016, a man named Thorne, living in Hickory, about 30 miles from Shelby, reported to the FBI that he had seen a young black girl get into a car early on the morning of February 14th, 2000. According to him, the car was a dark green 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or Ford Thunderbird. He couldn't recall the license plate, but he remembered the small figure clearly and the way the girl stepped into the vehicle, as if she recognized the person inside. The statement rocked those who had followed the case for years. If true, it was the first eyewitness account of Asha actually entering a car, and it strongly supported the theory that she hadn't walked the entire distance on foot. But it also came 16 years too late. And complicating things further, the vehicle description didn't match any data collected from traffic cams or local reports at the time. So why hadn't this man spoken up earlier? He claimed he hadn't realized the importance of what he saw until he recognized Asha's face years later in a special FBI segment. Once again, the case divided. Some believed this was the missing piece, especially since Ferguson was known to have once owned a classic Thunderbird. Others remained skeptical. No camera footage, no license plate, and a 16-year-old memory that could easily be distorted over time. Even if the sighting was accurate, there was no way to confirm who was behind the wheel. And if Asha did know the person in that car, then who were they? For the Degree family, the emotional swing hit hard again. The hope of a new lead clashed with the fear that it might be just another dead end. In an interview following the statement, Akila said simply, "I don't know if it's true, but I do know one thing. My daughter didn't disappear by choice. Someone took her." And in that moment, the last pillars of certainty began to shake, not from a lack of information, but from the weight of too many incomplete answers. When the report about the old green car was made public, it felt like a narrow beam of light cutting through the fog that had surrounded the case for nearly 2 decades. But as had become a bitter pattern in Asha's story, that light quickly faded. No such vehicle was ever found. No other witnesses came forward. And the man who gave the tip, though seemingly well-intentioned, couldn't offer any additional details to verify what he'd seen. In the end, the FBI had to admit the lead, while compelling, wasn't enough to act on. Once again, the case returned to square one. At this point, faith in solving the case began to fracture, not just for the Degree family, but among the many people who had followed the story for years. Those who were once sources of hope, the FBI, the media, the online community, began to step back. Public sentiment shifted quickly. Some even began pointing fingers at the Degree family themselves. Rumors swirled online, suggesting Asha might not have gone missing at all, but had been hidden for some unknown reason. There was no evidence, but the accusations persisted. And while no one in the Degree family was ever charged, that quiet suspicion left deep emotional scars. In a rare interview, Asha's father, Harold, once said, "You can't imagine what it's like losing your child and then having to answer questions, like you're the one to blame." The cruelty of public speculation pushed the family into silence. They withdrew from the media, lived more privately. But what hurt most wasn't the gossip. It was the feeling of abandonment. After more than a decade, Asha's name was barely mentioned in the national press. She vanished from major forums, from the sides of milk, cartons from the priority list of active investigations, as if her disappearance itself had faded from public memory. And slowly, a haunting question began to rise among those who once believed that the truth would eventually surface. If every theory led to a dead end, if no one had the motive, the time, or the opportunity to take Asha, then what really happened? It was in this atmosphere of doubt that a seemingly minor discovery shifted the conversation once again. In 2018, during a routine case audit by the FBI, a strange detail resurfaced. An early tip, a phone call from an anonymous witness, had been recorded but never fully followed up. The caller, on the morning of February 14th, 2000, claimed to have seen a girl matching Asha's description standing near an old gas station about 5 miles from her home. The person didn't leave a name or number. They simply said, "I think she's waiting for someone." The call was documented, but without any way to confirm. It had been filed under unverifiable. Nearly 20 years later, it was finally reconsidered. When news of the tip broke, the case sparked to life again. If that witness had been telling the truth, it suggested something chillingly specific. Asha hadn't been wandering aimlessly. She had a meeting, a planned rendezvous, and whoever she was meeting might have been someone she trusted, maybe even someone she cared about. But again, no one knew who the caller was. There were no working cameras at the gas station that morning. And more importantly, this theory contradicted earlier ones. If Asha had been kidnapped, why was she calmly waiting? In public? If she had left on her own, why pack so carefully and then vanish completely? The deeper the case went, the more it resembled a maze with no exit. Every new lead shattered what had once seemed like solid ground. For the Degree family, this period was emotionally devastating. They had spent years believing that Asha had been taken, that she needed to be found, rescued. But now, even that belief was being challenged. If she had left for a reason, and something terrible happened afterward, what did that mean? Who was responsible? And most painful of all, had there been signs they missed, something they failed to see, or simply refused to believe? Every theory began to crumble. No suspect had solid evidence against them. Witnesses came too late. Vital details had been overlooked from the beginning. And as the cracks in the system became more obvious, the biggest question of all, what really happened to Asha Degree, remained quietly and painfully unanswered. Nearly 2 decades have passed since that Valentine's night in 2000. In Shelby, where police sirens once wailed and news, cameras flashed, only silence remains, and a small sign posted in the Degree family's front yard. It bears Asha's name, the date she went missing, and a quiet plea. We're still looking for her. The Degrees never moved. They didn't leave to escape the memories. They stayed to wait, so that anyone passing by would remember. So that if, one day, Asha came home, she'd know she was never forgotten. Asha Degree has kept her daughter's room just as it was. The pillow is still in place. Her bookshelf still holds The Whipping Boy, Asha's favorite. Every day, Asha prays, not only for her child, but for anyone who's ever faced the same heartache. She once said, "I don't expect to hear her call me from the front door anymore, but I still believe someone, somewhere, knows the truth." That kind of faith isn't measured by investigations. It isn't based on evidence, but on a mother's love. The one constant that has never faded. Harold, Asha's father, carries his grief more quietly. He rarely gives interviews, seldom appears in public. But every year, on February 14th, he joins his wife and hundreds of others to walk in Asha's memory. It's not an angry protest. There are no slogans, no demands, just the sound of footsteps moving gently through the old streets where Asha once rode her bike, once laughed, once lived. A walk to say, Asha Degree is not just a missing person file. She is part of this community, and she deserves to be remembered for who she truly was. From that same community, old neighbors, former teachers and classmates, now grown and scattered, still remember her. Each carries a memory, her quiet smile, thoughtful eyes, the time she recited a poem in class. Those memories won't solve the case, but they keep Asha's story alive, not forgotten, not reduced to a statistic. We may never know exactly what happened that night. Asha may have followed someone she trusted, or maybe she believed she was doing something right, and simply got lost in a world too cruel for a child's heart. Whatever the case, one truth is clear. The system failed to protect her, and we, as a society, as a community, didn't do enough to keep the light shining on cases like hers, especially when the missing child is a black girl from a small town without the privilege that often draws media attention and relentless pursuit. At Hidden Echoes, we don't tell these stories to accuse or to decide who's right or wrong. We tell them because some pain should never be left in silence. Asha Degree is one of thousands of unresolved missing person cases. But she is not just a number. She was a little girl who read books by her nightlight, who smiled wide when she scored a basket. She is part of a family that never stopped loving her, and a community that never gave up hope. If you've made it this far, to the end of this video, we want to thank you, not just for listening, but for doing the most important thing. You remembered Asha. In a world overwhelmed by headlines, where stories get lost in the scroll, your presence here means something. We invite you to reflect with us. What do you believe truly happened that night? Who's holding the answer? And more importantly, is justice really justice if it doesn't reach everyone equally, regardless of race, background, or circumstance? Comment "Me Too" if you believe that Asha Degree and children like her deserve to be found, to be remembered, and to have their stories told with dignity. Follow Hidden Echoes to hear more untold stories told with depth and fairness.